Yes. Înainte să vă așezați, sau în timp ce vă așezați, pentru persoanele care vorbesc doar limba română sau care nu înțeleg engleza, există acolo un sistem care permite traducerea în timp real. Deci dacă aveți nevoie de traducere, să vă așezați cât mai aproape de partea aia. Că în rest va fi în engleză toată discuția. I was telling them there's a translation system for the people who only speak Romanian.
Someone will translate, so someone will translate directly.
Yeah, in Romanian, from English to Romanian.
Okay, so you have to tell us when to stop, maybe.
No, because it's simultaneous, so they are doing it as you speak. Yeah.
Perfectly.
Perfecto. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Could you tell us?
Entre les ventes et les démolitions, on est à 30 000 à peu près.
Par an?
En 2020. Ouais. Les ventes, démolitions, ventes et démolitions. Et 70 000 nouveaux livres.
Et par les démolitions, 10 000 par an.
8 000.
Ah bon?
Turu.
Des éléments
Officiel.
Dacă vrei să apari în stream, ar trebui să stai cumva la limită, să fii cumva între stări. Aici nu o să se poate.
Ah. Ok. E ok și dacă dispar și dacă apar.
See the time. I don't know at all. Like you check it's minutes or not or something.
Okay, so we should start because it's almost like 6:10 and the time is short. Nora! Hi! Yeah. So thank you for being here, everyone, and for all of the people who chose to be here today and to talk to us. The discussion today is supposed to be about gentrification and the ways in which activist organizations manage to fight against it, and how all of the bad stuff happens under the guise of urban renewal. And the structure of the discussion will be, so I think we will have an introduction by Jan, who will talk a bit about the EAC. And then Eniko will start and will maybe give a short overview of what we do in Cluj as the Cărți Sociale Acum group. And then there will be 7 other speakers that I will introduce. And each of you will have around 8 minutes to speak. Everything is live streamed, and I think it would be best if you have questions to make a note of them and ask them at the end. We will have a Q&A session of about half an hour after everyone gets to talk. So I hope that's okay. Again, pentru cei care vorbesc doar română, acolo este sistem pentru dacă vreți traducere în direct din engleză în română. So, Ian, please begin. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we are very happy to be here in Cluj. I will do a very brief introduction of the European Action Coalition for the Right to Housing and to the City. Also, if you have questions after, I think we can solve it in the discussion. I think it's more important now to have the inputs, and after all the members can very good answer to the question, what is the European Action Coalition? It's a process of convergence that started almost 10 years ago of different grassroots collectives. So it's non-parliamentary groups that are organizing in the field of housing struggles and right to the city struggles. And at the moment we are about 35 groups from 20 different countries. Not all of these groups have managed to send people here, but we are still a lot. And what is maybe important to say is that these collectives are very diverse. This means like we have bigger national organizations that have different structures in the cities. We have small collectives that are fighting gentrification in one city. We have people that are more organized in a way of research. We have an anarchist squad from Poland. And so it's quite diverse. I think it's a strength. It's also a difficulty in the way how we organize. And also we have to reflect that the conditions under which we struggle in the different geographies are very, very diverse. So there is different situations of how many tenants we have and how many house owners. Is there a tradition of social or public housing or not? And so this makes our work in the coalition even more complex, but also even more interesting and fruitful. And what we are actually doing is like since almost 10 years we are meeting, so we exchange our ways of struggling. It's a kind of mutual learning. We have different topics that the groups are organizing, like as I said before, like against evictions, for more social housing, and some people organize with people that have no house at all. Yeah. And so it's different topics. And yes, the main idea or what we try to do is from the struggles from the other geographies, to learn for our own struggles in our local situation. So we explain what we are doing, how we attack this law or this situation, and in a lot of ways you can transfer some of these tactics or some of these strategies to your own local situation. This is the one point that what we're mainly doing in these meetings when we are coming together. And what we also do is like a kind of production or gathering of knowledge for different topics, let's say. We did in the past some brochures on financialization, on skill sharing, for example, where we make it also accessible, our internal discussions accessible for other people. They take the brochure and see how the people are struggling in some specific region or city. And for this reason, we also are used to organize in working groups. So, for example, this brochure on financialization was done by the research working group. We have or had other working groups like Stop Eviction working group, legal group, an action group, or a skill sharing group who in the end produced this brochure. And another part is, because we are the action coalition, is that we try to take collective actions also on a more upper level than in our local struggles. And the most visible outcome of this is like, since 4 years, I think we do the Housing Action Day. It's in the end of March, we call for actions in the field of housing and city rights. The reason why we started is that in some countries there is a winter moratorium on evictions, which ends in the end of March. And we were starting to say like, no, we don't want to have evictions all the year, but in general it's more a bigger frame where we put our local struggles under a common roof somehow. And so we have a lot of actions in the last, now in the Housing Action Days, which were actually 10 days that we called for this period of actions. And I think we had like about 120 actions in 60 cities when I'm right. This is the most visible thing where the coalition appears somehow. We do also kind of minor campaigns or solidarity actions. For example, this year we also went again to the MIPIM. The MIPIM is the biggest real estate fair. It's happening in Cannes every year, Cannes in France, where all the players of the real estate market are meeting, and also the people, elected people from the municipalities, and there is somehow designed the trends that how they will attack us in the future, let's say, how they are, yeah, okay, no, it's not what they are saying to do, but it's mainly like they define the new strategies of, okay, how they will sell out our cities, let's say. And yes, and for, I think like the strongest point of our coalition is that we try to reinforce our local struggles by putting it on another level. It's almost very important that we know we are not alone in this struggle, and we have comrades all over Europe fighting more or less the same stuff. We see like we are not that lost, and we are confronted by the same systemic problems, even if they are differently in the different geographies.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Eniko, would you like to continue? The order of the speakers is random.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So as Jan said, we are not lost, but the title of today's event is Lost in Urban Regeneration. So in a way, we are keeping losing something, and this is the aim of our debate today, to raise questions about how our cities are restructured under new real estate investments and developments. And we have here a whole range of countries, countries from Southern Europe, Portugal, Greece, Western Europe, like France, Central Europe, Austria, and also Netherlands belongs to Western Europe, or West North, and Sweden. So hopefully at the end of the day we will learn about the different historical pathways and current situations in these countries. And yes, besides learning about the problem or how the problem is created across countries, yeah, maybe this is a good opportunity to learn how to act against it. And we are really empowered here in Cluj, our movement, Cluj Sociale Acum, Social Housing Now, to host the coalition for these 4 days. And we proposed actually as one of the topics of our public events this issue of so-called urban regeneration, or gentrification if you wish, because in our city, Cluj-Napoca, more recently, people are getting used with this term, regenerare urbana. So we are promised by the city hall, and we are promised by the real estate developers that at the end of these projects, our city will be more beautiful, more attractive to tourists, and so on and so forth. So it's what we also observed in the local civil society, so to speak, is that more and more people are upset what is happening in their built environment. Yeah, like, you know, the appearance of 10-story or even 20-story blocks of flats in a neighborhood that used to have smaller houses, or the permanent construction sites in and around the city parks, because they are also so-called restructured. So everybody is kind of upset about what is happening, but people do not really know how to act against it, and how to even put the problem, the argument, why is this not good? or at least it's not good for everybody. So slowly we are learning to, and this is what a role or that our movement took on in this regards in the city, to have a contribution to raise awareness about the fact that actually urban regeneration means an umbrella for creating new investment opportunities for real estate developers. And who creates these investment opportunities? As usually the state and the local government has a huge role to play in this. And actually, as a well, it's not so recent because we already have 30 or so years of capitalism beyond ourselves. But yeah, it's a recent history for us in a way to learn, you know, to decipher capitalism and take critical standpoints towards it. And in issues of housing and urbanism, I guess it's very important to do this work. So what the City Hall does, for example, as a matter for supporting these changes or to support the investment opportunities and opportunities for capital accumulation for profit making at the end of the day, starts with all sorts of urbanistic plans, right? Starting from the general urbanistic plan, which defines particular streets or areas in the city, and not only the downtown central areas, but many areas across different neighborhoods, old districts. So defines them as characterized by urban decay as needed for restructuring, right? And then you see the first signs of this. Prices are increasing, prices of the houses, of the land, which we all know means that more and more people who cannot afford to buy a home from the market or cannot pay the private rent will leave from the city. So actually, there are a lot of losses in this process, and who gains are actually these investors. And at the top of everything, as usually they say that this is actually something good that they do to us, so they are the solution because there is nobody else who would take this role to build new homes, so they are very useful for us, and we have to be happy with these urban regeneration plans. Yeah, and just an last additional thought, and maybe this is something that occurs in other countries as well, the role of international organizations in all this. For example, the World Bank has a long-standing commitment to urban regeneration in this sense, and experts of World Bank are also very closely contributing to the new urbanistic plans from Cluj as well. So yeah, I was thinking to read a quote from a World Bank document, which, yeah, how they define urban regeneration, and then we understand and we can imagine what's happening. And this is the quote: "The redevelopment of city centers from an overcrowded, slum-filled urban core during the beginnings of self-governance in the 1960s to the modern global financial centers today is often held up as one of the most visible manifestations of the city-state's success." So what is a success for some is a series of bad experiences for others, for those who lose actually their city and their ability to continue living in the city where they work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next, we will have Yannick from the BPW in the Netherlands. You can have this.
Thank you. The only thing is Robert from the BPW. Doesn't matter. Thank you for the introduction. Yesterday was King's Day in the Netherlands, a national holiday to honor the king. A public holiday where many people dress in orange to celebrate. This year, the king and his family chose to go to Rotterdam. Rotterdam is the poorest city of the Netherlands, a city where 20% of the people live below the poverty line. a city where there are human rights violations regarding tenancy as stated by the United Nations. That's why the Bond Precaire Woonvormen, as part of the Dutch Housing Coalition, called for everyone to dress in black instead of orange. Geen woning, geen koning. Or in English, no housing, no king. The Dutch king is rich, so is his family. One of the princes, Prince Bernhard, for example, is a well-known landlord who owns a lot of properties in Amsterdam. The affordability of housing for their subjects does not seem to concern the king, nor his family, nor the government. They seem more interested in extracting as much wealth as possible, despite the well-being of the people. And this arrogance of wealth is exemplary of housing in the Netherlands. Not only the affordability, but also the security of tenure is under threat. These go hand in hand. Temporary housing contracts allow landlords to house people for a year or two, after which they often force the tenants to move out so the rent can be increased to market rents. This despite of the legal rent increases that every other tenant, regardless of contract, can already expect each year. So why would people choose a temporary contract? No one does, of course. Security of tenure is essential for the well-being of everyone, but ever since the government allowed it, many landlords choose it because it benefits them. In a short time, rents have increased drastically, forcing people to move to other cities or to other neighborhoods they aren't familiar with. The social environment changes with each person moving. Rich people take over the neighborhoods, and with them, they threaten the other tenants who haven't been forced out yet. Here we see most clearly the examples of gentrification. Teachers can't afford to live near the schools they teach anymore. Nurses can't live in the neighborhoods where their patients are. Local small entrepreneurs are bought out and replaced by yet another McDonald's or a large other chain such as Domino's. And as more and more people leave, so does the social ecosystem. People don't know each other anymore, relationships break up, friends are gone. And it seems there's little hope, as neither the government nor the king seem too concerned. And this is where the Bond Precaire Woonvormen derives its purpose from: to help people protect themselves and their neighborhood by standing up for their rights. We support and organize solidarity networks in multiple cities in the Netherlands. With local consultation hours, we inform tenants of their rights and how to stand up and fight for their rights. Tenants in the Netherlands have a lot of legal protection in many cases, something that's left over from before the privatization of the 90s. However, you need to know your rights well, because the landlord isn't going to explain it proactively. Neither are the laws written so that everybody can understand them. The Bond Precaire Woonvormen does proactively help. We support people who are being evicted with moral and legal support. With rent increases, we inform them how they can refuse or object against it. During the Housing Action Days, we had multiple protests in various cities. On the one hand, to show the government this is not a durable situation, but also to inform people that by working together in solidarity, we help each other and ourselves. If you stand alone against your landlord, you can be ignored or threatened. That is, if you even know what you can do. If you work together, organize tenants' organizations, you can share the collective knowledge and find strength in the mutual struggle. And you can also send a lot stronger message to the landlords. We will not be evicted for yet another Starbucks, or worse, more vacant homes to drive the prices up. We will not pay half our wage for a broom closet. We will fight back for what we deserve: a city for people to live and love in, housing for people and not for profit. And I hope that was 8 minutes.
That was 4 minutes. You deserve a prize. Colin from Vienna, I got it.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So we're a rather young group, so we've been active for almost a year, and we fight against evictions, gentrifications, and exploitations of living conditions. So for us, evictions are just not something that happens. For us, evictions is the symptom of the systematic exploitation of living conditions, driving people living in precarious situations even more into poverty. And there we have to tackle the system, and we have to change the system into a profit-oriented way towards a human needs-oriented way. often people look at Vienna and have a very romanticized view of the past, because in the 1920s, in the 1950s and 60s, the city government built a lot of social housing. These social housings make up, or 40% of the tenants in Vienna live in social housings, yet these social housings do not prevent people from being evicted. Half of the evictions in Vienna happen in social housings. So we can see that socialization of property is not, for us in Vienna, the solution of the problem of gentrification, because these city-owned buildings are managed in a profit-oriented way. Yeah, but obviously our problems, our fights aren't only focused on social housing. We also fight for people that are most exploited by capitalist system. For example, people that live undocumented in Austria. We're supporting houses where people cannot argue with tenants and with house owners. We support them, provide social help. Yeah, and yeah, that's it.
I think we can just, maybe you continue, sorry.
Okay, so hello, I am Stella from DAL, Droit au Logement, from France. So I will try to have like a more historical approach to urban regeneration, also because in France the history of urban regeneration, it goes back like some centuries ago. Maybe you have heard about it, but there is a very good book of a Marxist geographer, David Harvey, which is called Paris History of Modernity. And it describes in a very interesting, historical and political approach what was the first urban regeneration project about. Actually, it happened during the what we call the Second Empire in France. So basically, during the revolutionary years, let's say 1803 to 1879, during after the Paris Commune. So actually, it was the first big urban intervention in the capital of Paris, which was before a small city, and after it became what we call now the City of Lights. And for sure, it was for economic reasons, because we wanted to transform the city in order to create a different kind of, shops, commerce. So an economy of a different scale, and also because the capitalist accumulation was entering in a new phase. But it was for sure also a regeneration which happened for a political reason, because there was this revolutionary period, and actually which was actually happening in a very which was kind of based in the city as a strategy. For example, creating the barricades and all this urban strategy or space strategy. So the urban regeneration also was thought as a way to prevent these kind of movements, revolutionary movements, and also to push the working class, this dangerous class, away from the city center. So this was kind of the first phase. After we entered later in a second phase, let's say maybe what we say also is that the history of urban regeneration of working class neighborhoods, because actually, at least in France, when we speak about urban regeneration, it's always towards working class neighborhoods. We never have these big projects in the rich neighborhoods because they don't need it. Anyway, so the history of urban regeneration of working class neighborhoods reflects always the history of power relationship between working class and the ruling class. And we see it, for example, that there was in the what we call in French the Trente Glorieuses, the glorious 30s, so actually the period between the two world wars. We entered in another phase where we had this kind of, economy of production with industrialization and with the construction of these big working class neighborhoods. And this was also accompanied with a lot of other social measures. It was related to a whole period with these characteristics of social improvement in the housing topic, but also in other topics. And in this moment we had also the moment where the rents were the lowest in France, and the housing crisis was in the lowest point. So after that, especially after the 70s and the 80s, with the new politics of the new neoliberal politics, and also this kind of rent capitalism, which was creating profit by rent and by speculation, there was another phase of re-attacking social housing by these urban regeneration projects, which create gentrification. So basically we started to regenerate the working class neighborhoods, which were in the kind of the periphery of Paris, and again, like to push people away and to create this gentrification. And the highest point of this, it happened in the beginning of 2000, where the French state created this big urban regeneration project by saying, which was targeting every working class neighborhood everywhere in France. So it was this, we say that it was like the biggest space intervention after the Second Empire intervention. And also in this phase we see how this political and economical reason is very related, because actually this project was proposed during the Sarkozy government. So after this, maybe you have heard about it, after this 2005 uprising, which was happening in the neighborhoods, in the suburbs of Paris, but also in other suburbs of big cities in France. So it was a really big revolt coordinated in the whole country, which lasted for a long time, of the young people in the neighborhoods. And as a political response to this, the government said, okay, we are going to invest, to intervene, to do something for the neighborhood. So what we are proposing is urban regeneration. And it's kind of interesting to see how we give this urban response to a political crisis. I don't know how we get to this point that we give this solution to a political problem as the one of the 2005 uprising. And also after this, this also came with another very, very big project, at least in Paris, of a new transport, the construction of a new metro, which was going to kind of connect the suburbs of Paris. So we have again the same mechanisms as we see always in this gentrification project, the states who intervenes in infrastructure and in urban regeneration in working class neighborhoods in order to gentrify them. And the other reason why they say they do it is to create social mixity. So they say, okay, these neighborhoods have big problems because they are poor neighborhoods, so the solution will be urban regeneration because we will create social mixity, and so this will help people to culturally, how to say, interact with one another, and the poor will take good example of the middle class, and this will calm down. And also for political, for economical reasons, we say that if we have more middle class people living in working class neighborhoods, we will have more money, the municipalities will have more money because they will get more money from the taxes of these middle class people, so we could invest more. Well, generally, the result is that actually these neighborhoods are totally transformed with time, and they are totally gentrified, and people are pushed away all the time, even far. And yeah, and basically that's it. And maybe to finish, we have really hard time to stop this. Like in France, like this is again the biggest operation from decades. And for example, we were trying to find some real, how to say, numbers of how many demolitions per year are happening, and the official one is like 10,000 demolition per year or of social housing in this urban in the cadre of this urban regeneration projects. So also, when we speak about urban regeneration in this third phase, it's mostly demolition of public housing and construction of new housing, which is not really public. It's a different style in order to create mixity. So yeah, and it's really, we are facing really big problems to coordinate and to mobilize, also because this argument of social mixity is kind of working, at least in the public opinion. And we, at least we in our organization, in DAL, we insist that it's not about social mixity. For us, what is happening with these projects is social epuration, presented like that. Yeah. Thank you.
Anna, right, from Lisbon.
Yes. And from Habita in Lisbon, Portugal. Habita means to inhabit, and our motto in our organization is the home or the house to those who inhabit it. We are a residents organization, and we have for long been fighting and struggling against demolitions, violent demolitions, perpetrated by the state outside Lisbon, so in Lisbon metropolitan area. But because we didn't fight gentrification, because gentrification wasn't going on yet. Gentrification is a very recent phenomenon, maybe as in Cluj in Portugal, meaning that this urban regeneration in the historical centers only began to happen in 2012, 2013. Before, the historical centers in Portugal, so I mean Lisbon and Porto too, were, and still are, but gentrification has made its violent evictions, were inhabited mainly by the working class, elderly people, migrant workers, especially from the Portuguese-speaking former colonies. And so it was a very, it was historical centers that were very working class, meaning that they had very strong neighborhood ties and neighborhood rules. The restaurants and shops were to people who lived there, cheaper, and I don't know, for instance, the dogs would walk freely there. So it had special rules, solidarity rules between people, working class people, in order to survive. And the thing is, both in Lisbon and in Porto, most of the people that lived in the historical centers were tenants. So, which means a more fragile or more prone to evictions population, right? But we had a tenant law until kind of, it's disputable, but until 2006, that was very protective of tenants. So evictions were not easy. And gentrification began in 2012 because the IMF, when we had the crisis, the IMF with the last financial crisis, the IMF said, okay, Portugal has to liberalize the renting law. So we passed from having a law that protected tenants to a law that facilitated evictions to a very easy level. So landlords started to being able to evict, to displace the tenants, the rents, or to raise rents. The contracts started to not have a minimum period, so a landlord could do a one-day contract, for instance. And together with this, there were put in place many policies to attract foreign investment to real estate and foreign consumers. And this, like the Golden Visa program and other programs to attract investment, so foreign investments could make a high profit out of buying and selling or renting housing in the historical centers in Portugal. And also, together with this, there were big campaigns to promote tourism and to attract tourism to Lisbon and Porto. Like, for instance, Ryanair flights were facilitated, so they had some tax breaks to use the lines in the airport in Lisbon. So this low cost, exactly. Low cost was promoted, and the public money was used and is still used to promote tourism campaigns outside, so it attracts more foreign investors and more tourists, and also the appearance of Airbnb. So what happened is that people got displaced from these historical centers, and investors started to buying whole buildings to do Airbnb. So basically what they did was an investor would buy a whole building, would evict the tenants that were there, would regenerate the buildings or rehabilitate it, and then put it on Airbnb. So what we have now is a gentrification, tourism gentrification, which means, and gentrification means, it's like the political word for urban regeneration. Gentrification implies the displacement of low-income people to make room to wealthier people, that in this case are tourists. And right now, we have 10% of the housing in the whole Lisbon is Airbnb. And we have these historical centers have more than 50% of the whole housing is used to Airbnb. Then some other percentage is like vacant, just used as to sell as pure speculation. And there is a little rest where people are still living. But this is what gentrification did, was to end these working class neighborhoods, end these neighborhood ties that were going on. And it transformed the neighborhoods into sterile places for tourism, consumerism, with, I don't know, restaurants that are very expensive, that no one wants to use, with very bad food. And so, okay, so gentrification through tourism. And what are we doing to fight against it? In Habita, we do assemblies. We do many, many things, but mainly we do assemblies with people that are being evicted, and we try to find individual strategies to fight evictions to each people. And we're organized against evictions, departing from individual problems. And then we entered in a bigger project to fight this kind of Airbnbization of the whole Lisbon. That is, we started last summer, a project, a local referendum. We were inspired by Berlin, because Berlin, I don't know if you know, but they managed to do a local referendum to expropriate big landlords. And we heard about it and we thought, okay, let's try and make a local referendum in Lisbon too, but to ban Airbnb from residential buildings, which means most of them. And yes, this project is going on and it's creating a lot of mobilization. And the thing is, this is at the same time a very quite institutional tool, because everyone knows what a referendum is. So even people that are not politically very engaged or organized already, they know, oh, a referendum, okay, we'll vote on something. But at the same time, it's very radical, because this tool, a local referendum by popular initiative, has never been used in Portugal. So what we have to do is to collect signatures, and then there's a legal process, but then we can implement it, and then we have to win it. It's a big project, but we are not dependent on the wills of the state somehow. So we can do it with our own hands. We have to build up a very big machine to mobilize and to make people vote, but maybe we can win it, and if we win it with a high percentage, it will be legally binding, which means the municipality will be obliged to obey to our command, to say, okay, no more Airbnb in the city. And this could be a huge victory, yes. Against the system, against gentrification, it would lower rents, so it would be amazing. It will be difficult, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, and a model as well, so then others can... okay, and Anna from Porto.
Yeah, hi, I'm also Anna from Habitação Hoje in Porto. We are a relatively recent organization for the fight to the right to housing. We've been doing work in Porto for about 2 years now, and we believed in an informed and collective fight. So we try as much as possible to have two approaches. One is to understand the problem, understand what's happening right now and what solutions we can propose, what political solutions we can propose, but also to build the people's power and to be together with the people and to try to show people that if the struggle is collective, we have a lot more power to demand. As Anna already said, in Portugal, the city centers were inhabited by working class people, and this was also a conscious decision of the municipalities to not rehabilitate these centers. One of the reasons that low-income people live there is because no one else wanted to. And then once the capital had an interest in having these properties vacant, these people were immediately displaced. I think since we are in a European and transnational context, it's also, Anna already mentioned the influence of the IMF and the financial crisis that really affected Portugal and really took away any sovereignty that we might have had before during that period. It's also important to understand that this process that started in the 70s and 80s of neoliberalization of the housing market was really exacerbated when we entered the European Union. So it was almost a condition that our housing market had to be available. And to talk more about the concrete situation in Porto, one thing that we see with regards to gentrification is that to an extent it keeps reinventing itself. So there is this touristification wave that of course is still very present, but then we have a more recent wave of the digital nomads, who are people who are getting fiscal benefits from the state and who can only get fiscal benefits if they earn above a certain income, which is very high compared to Portuguese income. I think it's about 4,000 euros per month. The minimum salary in Portugal, which many people earn, is 700 euros, more or less. And in Porto, one thing that we're seeing, even though it's sometimes more concrete than others, is this technology hubs. not in Porto itself, but in neighboring municipalities like Gaia and Matosinhos. There are these talks of these technology hubs, and then basically the local municipality starts doing the work of the capital, if I may say so. And if the market is free, then why does the state need to intervene so much on its behalf? But that's what happens. So basically they start, we have situations where they start evicting people from state-owned houses. They use, in the media, they use arguments like we need to evict them because we need houses for victims of domestic violence, or we need houses for homeless people. Well, in fact, they are many times evicting victims of domestic violence who occupied the houses because no public solution was offered to them. And then, in the end, a lot of the times what they use is this program that we have in Portugal called affordable renting, which is anything but affordable renting, which means that the state sets the rent 20% lower than market price, so it's set towards the market, with reference to the market, not with reference to what people earn, exactly. And you cannot have, you cannot pay more than 30% of your income because that is considered a problem. You would be having too much effort, financial effort with your rent. So what this leads to is that a lot of people who work and who have income don't earn enough to be in this program. So what this means is, this is basically a strategy where you take people who are living in social housing and you replace them with the middle class. And then probably you're going to replace the middle class with someone who has even more buying power, because this is how the process goes. So yeah, I mean, what we are trying to do, I can say, for example, I'm going to focus specifically on one neighborhood, which is called Campanhã, for those of you who know Porto a bit. And it's a neighborhood where, as Stella, for example, mentioned, the state has invested in a lot of infrastructure. It's like a transportation hub. And what we are trying to do there is, for example, people who got evicted and who had a very strong sense of their neighborhood, we try to help them start a neighborhood association, because just because they got evicted, that doesn't mean they stopped being a community. And we set these demands. Of course, they don't give a shit about our demands, but it's important that we set them anyways. And we have other cases of particular types of housing in Porto that were created during the Industrial Revolution, which we call islands, who were houses that had no conditions in Porto, but that now are very attractive because you can basically build studios for digital nomads that don't mind living in 40 square meters for 2 months. And so we're trying to connect, for example, a group of people who are now being evicted from one of these so-called islands. We're trying to connect them with this other group that is already a residents' association, and trying to build more bridges with these specific problems, and trying to make people see that it is a collective struggle, that even if the manifestations are different, the problem is the same, and that we need to have this collective understanding of the problem and of what we are demanding.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Athens, Tony?
Yes.
Yeah, is it okay? Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, hello, also from me. So I'm Tonia. I'm a member of a movement from Athens that we are working for the last 10 years against auctions and evictions, and for the protection of the indebted people from losing their houses. But except our work in the movement that I'm trying to say after a little, I will try to see how these practices are connected with the more general issue of the attack also in the city and the public space. I think Greece has many common things with Portugal, we just heard. there are always problems of merchandise and financialization of the space and of the housing, but the last years after the crisis, the economical crisis of 2011, there was a big and strong change in this field. It is very interesting to see that in Greece in the same year, in 2011, there were two crucial decisions. One decision is that by the demand of the European observation of the Greek economy and the first memorandum, they asked for the Greek government to close the organization of the workers' housing, which was for 60 years, existing for 60 years. So now there is no more, is zero production of social and public housing. So in the same year, they create an organization that was called Organization for the Exploitation of the Public Property, which means that all the public property is under the control of this organization, which can decide at any moment to sell or to use the public property in any way that can produce profit for the debts of the Greek economy. So these are big changes, and from that time until today, all the practices of the Greek governments are led by the approach that everything is allowed to the investors, and that tourism is the leader sector for the Greek economy. So every day laws are changing. They allow the investors to do anything in the city, to do anything in the how can I say, in the agricultural areas, even to build big touristic complexes in protected natural areas, protected by Natura and things like that. So we have actually a very big change that there is presents a domination of the investors. One part of this attack is the part in the attack of the indebted people. The Greek banks were taking a lot of money, about 2 times the money that the simple families owned to the banks, to be saved at the period of the crisis. But, and also they have the allow to sell the loans of the indebted people in prices that comes to 10% of the cost of the loan to foreign funds, most of them based in countries with low taxes like Ireland, etc. And so, from these policies, the people that have problem with debts were completely unprotected, even for losing not only their properties, but the house they were living. So from 2013, when these politics were more obvious, we formed our group, and we are working for 10 years on this field, trying to protect mostly the people of losing their houses, but also trying to put a question on the ability of having strong cuts of the debts, because nobody can go on his life with the increasing debt by the profits of the banks and of the funds and so on. And because we are also part of a more important movement on terms of the problems in the city, we try to understand better if actually this movement has only to do, our movement has only to do with the house owning, which I think it's very important, or if there are paths that this is connected with the more general problems and the more general issue. So 2 years ago, we formed a watch, an auction watch, and we tried to understand what is going on in this field. What kind of properties are going to the auctions? What are the prices of these properties? Where are the properties? Who is buying? And this produced very interesting results. And the results is that first, the properties that are coming to the auctions are not properties of rich kind of properties, are not big properties, are properties that, especially housing, with prices less than 150,000 euros, from people that they have small loans, and in areas that are poor but with a potential of gentrification. So the banks are taken from the thousands of the people that have loans, these properties that are how can I say, the investors that they are going to buy them can use them for pushing the gentrification in certain areas and for getting great profits from these auctions. So we strongly believe that the movement against auctions today is not only a movement just for protecting the housing, but is a movement that is part of a struggle against the whole financialization of the city and of course of the housing. It is also a struggle of an important policy of a kind of a new circle of accumulation, which takes from the working people the means of their reproduction. And we find that this is also something very important, something that we have to fight against and to think for this. So we are feeling that we are a part of this bigger movement. And in Greece, at this moment, it's very interesting that this movement is getting stronger because it's not anymore a movement of activists, but it starts to be, and that is very important for us, a movement that the people that are infected are participating. And this is a big change and a very interesting change for us. Tell me about the time. We're okay?
Whenever you're
okay, that's it. So I think we can say more in our discussion.
Thank you. That was very interesting. And last but not least, Sweden. Ort till ort.
Yeah.
Jonas, hello, from Ort till ort. I'm going to be very specific and not talk about Sweden as a whole, just my municipality, which is called Sundbyberg, and it's a suburb of Stockholm. And that's where I do my organizing. So gentrification happens mainly in two ways, and those two ways are, one, that the municipality agrees to sell land or allows for land to be developed by private contractors. So they, the land becomes a place where they can build new expensive housing, and since it is new, they are basically unregulated in the price that they set. And that's the one way. We aren't really focusing on that because the majority of the houses in our municipality are owned by the municipality. And they do their gentrification in a different way. which is mainly that they neglect the upkeep of the apartments over years. And then they decide, well, now it's time to renovate. And in this renovation, you also need this towel heating rack for some reason. And that is going to make your apartment more expensive. So we see rent raises of 40 to 60%, which means that most people can't afford to live there and have to move out. Yeah, and the reason for these changes is the municipality are required by law to run their housing as a for-profit business. And this became a law because our big tenants union, I should explain, Sweden has a really big tenants union that has monopoly on negotiations. And that tenants union, along with the landlords, agreed that according to the EU competition laws, we have to run this state housing as a business. There was no actual pressure from the EU to do this. This was an agreement just in case of the future, I guess. And that's why they're pushing these prices, because now they need to make a profit of their housing. Yeah, that's the main issue. And I guess how we're fighting it is we are going around basically to as many people as we can and talking to them, because in order to make a renovation, you have to get agreement from all of the people living there. Like all the tenants have to agree that, oh, we want a renovation. And so we're basically trying to get them to say no. And if they say no, then the issue is moved over to hyresnämnden, which is renters' court, basically. Usually the landlords win in that court, but it's a way to buy time. And during that time, we are trying to get more people than those few who said no to come on board and also say no. Because the cases we've seen in the past that have succeeded in the renters' court have been cases where the majority of tenants have been on the side of being against the evictions. So that's basically what we're doing. And it's mostly a going door to door and talking to people and holding demonstrations, trying to make ourselves known. We've also tried to experiment a bit with historical methods that were used in Sweden, mainly in the 30s, which are blockades. And in the 30s, the renters movement in Sweden was very inspired by the workers' movement. So they would blockade properties that the landlord owns. And we've basically been doing the same. It's a bit difficult because we don't have the amount of people to stand every day and night at a storefront. And also a lot of the places are owned by small business owners. And we wouldn't get a very good reaction if we blockaded them and start to blame the municipality. So what we've been doing is blockading the empty storefronts that they are trying to rent out by setting up notices that we are putting this storefront under blockade and don't rent here. And it's difficult to say how successful it is, but recently we stopped the campaign because when at the end of last year, they started to make some changes in their policy, the municipality. And so we said, okay, we will observe these changes and how they affect the situation going forward. And until then, we have ended our blockade. And that's the only time we actually got proper feedback on this blockade, because the the local paper made a big story about, oh, Urtilut has ended their blockade, which I think is honestly more publicity than we got by just putting up the notices and people going by and seeing it. So, yeah, make statements when you end your campaigns and stuff, because it gets noticed. But that's basically what we've been doing. Yeah, I don't really have anything else.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, so much. I think now we can open up anyone can ask questions. Maybe you can just raise a hand and I have to come with the microphone to you. Or if it's too far back, you should have to. Okay, let's do this. What's the page?
Hi. This about regenerating neighborhoods and everything. In Barcelona, we are having now this big project of superillas, they call them super blocks, that they are in some neighborhoods. They are making pedestrian streets, blocking cars and everything. And of course, this is something the neighbors wanted for a long time, but at the same time, we know it's going to gentrificate the neighborhoods. And this is something that I always find a difficult balance, because for one side, I'm all for blocking cars, making pedestrian streets, making everything beautiful, make parks, make more trees, more green. But at the same time, there's always this fear. Oh my God, they are making this neighborhood beautiful. What are we going to do with all the people they're going to kick out? And it's just to leave it on the table. What do we do when we can say no to make a neighborhood more beautiful, but at the same time, we know there's going to be a struggle when this happens. And we find it in Barcelona, we find it a very difficult balance. And I wanted to know if everybody felt the same.
Thank you. If anyone wants to answer this, then you can just pick up the mic. Or should we pick, you want to answer? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we have the same in Brussels, actually. We have new circulation plans that imply like 1 cent streets and cyclist streets and pedestrian streets and stuff like that. And it's actually the same issue, so I think we should talk a bit later. Yeah.
Now that I think of it, in Eastern Europe, in Ljubljana, for example, it's the same thing. There's this place called Metelkova, and they're actually struggling to keep infrastructure which is crumbling, but they don't want to let it go because they know the process of regenerating it will mean that everyone in there gets lost. And it's literally dangerous to live there and to be there. Veda, do you want to add to? Should we talk about this and then move to another question? Yeah.
It's a great question here. We've got the same thing in the Netherlands, where the property value of a house decides 30% of the rent price. This means that for every upgrade, it keeps on getting worse. I also learned a valuable thing just today, that if there are squatters in the neighborhood, it's a reduction of 20%. Something that actually could help in this case. But there actually is no good answer for this part. We know from the Dutch government that they want to keep this in, and it seems like it's policy to actually make this happen, to keep this in. And there's a lot of conflicts about what's what could actually be done, because you cannot make your neighborhood any worse. So the only way that, in my opinion, we can continue is that we should strive and state that all people deserve a nice neighborhood to live in, and that obviously then if there are improvements in the poor neighborhood, that it should be ridiculous to raise these prices. But everything that we find ridiculous is something that many governments turn out to find very fun to do. And this is, as long as the property value is linked to the rent prices in any way, don't know if it's in other countries as well, this keeps on happening, and the only response would be to make your neighborhoods worse, which would be ridiculous as well. When I first picked up, I wished I had an answer, but now that I'm speaking, it's one of the most difficult things, because we want car-free cities, at least. We want better neighborhoods, we want more green, but... Well, exactly. And yeah, then we're getting back towards the... Yeah, the only thing I can think of now is in the Netherlands we need more squatters if the neighborhoods gets better, which in my opinion actually makes the neighborhood better as well. I don't know why they reduce it. But an actual solution, I wish I had it before I picked up the microphone.
I will speak again about the working class neighborhoods in France, and actually what's happening also there is that the governments let these neighborhoods, they abandon them for a very long time, and so the living conditions are really, really bad. At the end, when they present the projects, they still present like saying that, okay, we have to regenerate to make some beautiful, I don't know, park, or I don't know. And people, at some point, they know like that the project is not made for them, but at some point that also ask to leave. Like they want to leave from they ask themselves to leave from the neighborhood, because they are really like, they are living in very bad conditions. So one of the answers, maybe it could be to, besides of resisting when this regeneration project is happening, is to organize in a very long term, like all the time, in order to demand for good living conditions. When these neighborhoods are being abandoned from the state, we have to create like structures which are organizing every day in order to demand that these neighborhoods are entertained. So this solution of, okay, we will change everything now and we will make it beautiful and we will push you away, it won't work in a way. So one of the things we are trying to do in France is that we try to create local housing tenants unions and local groups which are organizing every day and defending the neighborhoods.
You are right, it's always difficult to have counter-arguments against these interventions. Because on the one hand we are told that they are beautifying the city, greening it, making pedestrian roads or bicycle roads or so on and so forth. On the other hand, they said that the city needs more housing and it's only the private sector that can generate that housing stock which is needed. So having these two mainstream political arguments from that side, it's very difficult, to counter-argue. So what we do is to, but this is mostly by narratives and trying to build counter-discourses or using our newspaper, Caramida, the Brick, for this reason, or making small militant research and publishing it, or making city tours and inviting people to look around and try to explain why it is happening what we saw. So we make very small actions, but actually, what our major argument is that, okay, the city needs new homes. There is no space anymore to expand the city because that period of time ended. It lasted till 2000 or so. So now everything returns to the existing built environment, which has to be destroyed and demolished. Okay, and we say, okay, we understand, obviously there is a need for new homes because there is one of the biggest problems in Romania with housing generally is the overcrowded homes. But why don't you think about public solutions? So why don't you use the existing land for building public housing? Or why don't you think about regulating the prices of land and of buildings in case of this regeneration project? So we are not against improving the built environment and making more homes and more suitable environments for the inhabitants, but we are for a city which creates this built environment to respond to people's social needs, right? Not to support the interests of capital accumulation. But yeah, this is obviously very difficult to go with this argument. Why? Because we are in the middle of the systemic problems that capitalist societies create. So we are not at all hopeful that we could stop these processes unless some structural changes will not happen, and our small housing movement can be part of those.
And about this, it might be different because the urban regeneration or rehabilitation of the historical centers in Lisbon and in Porto, they were done by these investors, not by the public. Some parts, yes, some plazas, but they thought they couldn't, there was no money, and then, so the strategy was also to attract foreign investment to rehabilitation. And what's happening is that people know that this rehabilitation is not for them, because what's happened is a selective rehabilitation that you see. The buildings that are beautiful and all, they are for tourism or for digital nomads or for these rich mobile populations. And the ones that are run down, that are not good, are the ones that still have people living in them. So there people know beautiful to who and whose life does this regeneration improve. Because when this regeneration comes, people get displaced. They don't, we are not the ones that are, which lives are better because of this. So, because this is not for us. This is a possible narrative also. And then about the same strategy as squatting, which is amazing. I remember the urban myth. I don't know if I think it was an urban myth of somewhere in the United States. There is this story about a guy in a gentrifying neighborhood that in order to stop gentrification, he would go to his balcony every night, and with a pistol he would take 2 shots so he would scare the investors. It wasn't safe. So it can be a strategy to fake the unsafety so they get scared and they don't go there.
Yeah, maybe just to add another maybe funny story, in Berlin, in the autonomous movement, there was like a kind of campaign, translate like keep your neighborhood dirty. It was not exactly a campaign, maybe more an attitude in the logic of it's okay to throw your garbage in the street, it will keep the investors away, and if investors come and renovate the house, for sure the next day you have to go and put your graffiti. And actually we can say it was not very successful, and even the graffiti is now co-opted and is now as street art one symbol of this, we improve the quality of the city. And in Athens you have a lot of tours for tourists to see all the street art, and it's a company that is connected with Airbnb. And but I think it's even more tricky because in these cases of improving the quality of the neighborhood, they also use it as participatory tool and say, this is democracy, what we are doing, and they kind of undermined our ground in neighborhood organizing, and we have really few arguments against these procedures.
Yeah, sorry, this might be just a little bit of a tangent, but I was thinking like that one thing is that I think even though sometimes there are some participatory processes, I can say that, like in Porto, one thing that we have seen, for example, like in the work that led up to the demonstration, is like people talk a lot about having communal gardens where they can plant. And I think sometimes these sort of like the ideas that the investors have of what's a pretty and good city and the ideas that the people have of what is a better version of their own neighborhood are a lot of the times not the same. And it's, yeah, quite, in many cases, quite easy to tell. I'm not saying that cycle routes are bad or anything. Obviously, they're good improvements. But yeah, we see that yeah, sometimes people are not even that excited about these improvements because they are telling us stories of like, if I want to plant something, I need to go 1 hour by bus outside the city because all the like green areas are like, yeah, just grass, which is not even that like environmentally friendly or anything. But yeah, that was enough.
Yeah, I was thinking, just kind of building up on what you were saying, that well, I feel like it's really important that when we speak and we critique and we fight against gentrification, and we look at what urban regeneration actually is and how is it framed, to be very critical and insightful of the discourse that legitimizes, right, that confirms why is urban regeneration okay, right? So look at how the industry and local, central governments, how do they legitimize the idea of urban regeneration? What do they use, like why, how do they motivate it, right? So, and when looking at this, I mean, it's obviously, it's not just middle class, you know, it's not just about the middle class lifestyle. It's about, and all of you were kind of like saying little snippets about this, so it's a way of being in the world that is upper middle class, it is white, Western, it is heteronormative, it is gender normative, it has, you know, it supports colonial histories, militarization, all of these things. It's a way of being in the world. It's not just a lifestyle, it's not just like class belonging, it's a whole, like, it's a whole kind of type of person and of society. And this is what they, I mean, this is what it's used, right, to legitimize gentrification as urban regeneration, right? It is this promise that the city will become this kind of like, you know, white upper middle class, you know, imperialist or post-imperialist, you know, well, utopia for them. And what I'm saying is that this civilizational discourse, it's like super important to kind of like really, really, you know, like really point it out and really counteract it in these terms, right? So to say, you know, like, you know, we don't need your civilization. Your civilization, you know, is the one that, you know, created all genocides. It is the one that brought us into this climate disaster. Like all of that kind of position, I feel it's very important. And And when looking at this, also understand how this civilizational discourse is used differently according to context and geography, right? I mean, in the Netherlands, you were saying, that this, because it was what the birthday of the king or something, right? Something. Well, I mean, this is it, I mean, they, to what degree, this civilizational discourse, this kind of legitimizing, motivating urban regeneration and gentrification uses, for example, right, the whole colonial history of the Netherlands or of Portugal or of France or whatever. And then you look at context in Central and Eastern Europe, and this is used, the civilizational discourse is used differently, right? But it's the same discourse. But the kind of the trick is different. The trick here is to say, we need to do this so that the city, becomes Western. It becomes, part of Europe. We will not be behind anymore. And to do that, we need urban regeneration. We need to create these buildings. We need to kick out the people who do not fit this model of the human, whatever, etc. And so I'm just saying that I feel like this is super important to understand how this discourse, which is not just a class-based discourse, but so many other layers, actually is at the center of how they present us, how they sell us this fucking, the nightmare of urban regeneration, and how this, this discourse, this narrative is differently used, tactically used according to, to each country. Yeah.
Thank you. Did you have a?
Thank you very much, Vede, because I wasn't very sure how I could put my feelings towards this discussion here without putting it in a very naive way. So you just helped very much. I mean, we get very pessimistic if we look at urban regeneration if everything else keeps the same. So, okay, we recognize that we need some urban regeneration, or we need some improvement, which is not exactly what they say it is an improvement. And if we let everything else keep the same, we know what is going to happen next. But that's exactly the point. So I don't have a solution or the answer, of course, but that's why I think that Veda's intervention was very clear. So we want to improve the environment and we improve the way we live in the cities. We need more trees and we need more cycling things and everything. But we need to stay the same people, and this is a political choice. I mean, I can remember even in Porto, just after the revolution, that a big party in the city has been renewed, maintaining the same people there. So that can be done. It is a question of political will and political decision. So if we talk about renovation with everything going on like it is renoviction. But we still have to fight it, but not throwing away the baby with the water of the... It is, yeah, okay, we want to renovate, we want better environment, but we want to stay here. Okay, it's not easy, but I think it's the way we have to fight it.
Okay, thank you everyone. Actually, it was really interesting, this discussion, and it looks more like an assembly than a presentation. It's nice to have all these persons here. So I want to just raise a point that I feel we didn't discuss, and maybe you can share your opinion about it, but I feel that everyone showed that in each country there is a problem of urban regeneration that is evicting people, and I feel that this phenomenon is increasing, expenditure is increasing in this urban regeneration, in these gentrification processes all around Europe. So I think that what I see is that it's a European phenomenon and maybe a global phenomenon. And my lecture of it is, of course, an attack because the social effects are evictions, but also this urban regeneration is financed by public money, and it benefits private capital. So it means that we are paying our own eviction, in a way, because actually what I understand of the situation is that there was a lot of capital spent in housing, in tourist housing, and more in the period of the pandemic, when the capitalists, they didn't spend so much money in like industries because they were somehow stopped. And they decided to increase their expenditure in real estate. So the expenditure in real estate is more important. And here our public authorities, they say, oh, we will also do urban transformation so that the money invested in real estate can get more profit. So because regenerating a neighborhood like Exarchia in Athens, for example, it means giving more value, more real estate value to buildings that were bought by investors. So, and this urban regeneration is paid through public money. So for me, it's a real problem to understand how we can let that happen, you know? Not only because we want to stay there, as you said very correctly, yes, we want to stay in the neighborhood, but also we don't want to pay for the profits of investors and for us to be evicted. So how do also this economic profit, how do we deal, how do we stop paying for this, and how do we make investors pay what they took from us, you know? So it's an open question, I don't know.
Someone in the back, maybe, can you come a bit closer? I don't think the mic will go that far.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all people who are presenting today. And I would like maybe to comment a little bit on what Veda was talking about, this kind of colonialism, and to add from our experiences in the Czech Republic, where the last prime minister told that he will be governing the state as a business, and apparently all citizens are not citizens but employees. So I would just add to this colonial-wide Everything, also the working ethics, and also how this working ethics is used in this regeneration, that, okay, guys, if you don't earn that much money, you just will leave the city. But my question was about something else, and it was about what is the role of the climate justice movement in this regeneration or the struggle against regeneration, and if you have some nice experiences maybe of cooperation between urban movements and climate justice movement in this case.
So regarding the last question, I will answer that because at the end of March there was the European Gas Conference taking place in Vienna. There are big CEOs of big gas companies, investors and politicians met in Vienna, and there were protests organized in order to that, but before the protest took place, there was a counter-conference with social movements, with climate justice movements, organizing together workshops, events, and I think the way where the climate justice movement and housing correlates in this topic is that by increasing privatization of land, of gas, of energy, we push more and more people into poverty, and as I said earlier, by exploiting basic human needs, we provide more and more, or we push more and more people into vulnerable situations. So I can, I can say that the Power to the People conference, that was the name of it, was definitely a good example where climate justice movement and social housing movement could work together to provide new and renewable, on the one hand, energy sources, and on the other hand, fight for free and good living situations.
A lot has been said, but I really want to go back to the first thing that's been said during the intervention regarding, well, in this case, the King's Day in the Netherlands. We've got a colonial system. We've got a racist, sexist, transphobic system, also known as capitalism in some ways. And the King of the Netherlands is exemplary of this. This is a linear family that's been going around, is directly responsible for what's happening, and it's a capitalist accumulation that's not being stopped. If we're talking about the framing, I feel like this is exactly what needs to be said. This isn't fair. This isn't the way that should work. But how are people tempted? Because it's exactly focused on that. White, upper-class man who likes it, or who can afford it. We even had our Minister of Living at a public debate, and I believe it was a 25-year-old woman who said, I've studied, I've got, my parents are quite well off, I even can afford a house. And he said maybe you should get a rich husband. That's the way they view it, and I fully agree, honestly. I wish I could have traded places with you with the first question. This is the frame that needs to be openly admitted. This isn't a fair thing. We're pretending that we've got the best system and that somehow justifies pushing people out. But honestly, people, at least in the Netherlands, we don't talk anymore. We don't go out anymore. We don't really see each other anymore. We live in our little boxes, and that's where we, well, if we still can be able to live in this place. It fully needs to be this frame. In my opinion, exactly everything needs to be included. But that's the difficult part as well, because it hurts most people who basically are me. They won't like it, and because they're so fully aware of what their interest is, they will fight against it. And the only thing we can keep on doing is restating actually what you said, to make it clear up until they finally accept it. And that's the only other way to go. And with all the other questions, it's too much to really remember, but I did pick one thing up that I really liked about what could actually drop property value and could help, and it's maybe something we see from the United States, working from home. By all working from home, we've got a lot of empty offices. We show the bullshit of the working nowadays, how much space is used for nonsense. And simply not going to work would actually lower a lot of property value, would free us of a lot of the change that we have around us, and most of all, it would enable us to look at a future that isn't focused on Western European idea of greatness, but looking towards something that we could actually all live with and be happy with. And I also don't have an answer to this, but going towards that frame, that full frame, the intersectional view of what's happening, that is something that we need to work on and go towards, because with that point of view, and that's especially something in the Netherlands we need to work for, that is one of the ways that can only enable this. If we maintain our old view, it is the end of the line in a few years.
I have a different, also an answer to the question that was there before concerning the, working together of housing struggles and climate struggles. I think the perfect example is for the revolution of Rojava, which started as actually a struggle in their neighborhoods, a struggle for housing justice, a lot of people being evicted by the Syrian government. And they started to organize and also started to question the logics of the capitalist system, of capitalist modernity as a whole. So they were including in their struggle in their neighborhoods for housing, they included also the struggle for an ecological, livable future, the struggle against patriarchy, the struggle against colonialism, and the struggle also against the nation state, which enables all of this capitalist logic. And yeah, that's why in Vienna we work together a lot with the Kurdish freedom movement and also get inspired a lot by their approach to combining all of these angles and attack the system from all angles. So maybe we need to focus more on attacking the logics of capitalism and understanding our struggle as just one part of a bigger one. Yes.
Can I say something
Sure.
about the questions before? I think that we are in front of the need of struggles in two different levels. It's not only the one or only the other, because I think that if we focus and we force only for the one, we will miss important issues. For example, if we want to be, I agree with things that we have already said, that if we are against gentrification, we are first have to fight for the control of the rents, for the control of not changing the uses. It is not only an issue of denying the gentrification. It's not only an issue of, because you can deny gentrification here and then you have a gentrification somewhere else and then you have a gentrification. But if you fight for a policy that can, how can I say, can establish the rent control, can establish the control of the uses in the areas that will maybe will have a kind of regeneration in terms of everything, of more green, of more pedestrian streets, I think this is one part. Of course, there is also the other part, the part that put Veda with her question, because it's not only the people that are going to be thrown out, I mean, the people that have rent a house there, but there are also the people that are using the place, that are not, their existence there, it has nothing to do with the cost of the houses, but it has to do with all the atmosphere of the area. And this is a good example for Exarchia Square, as Eva said before, because in Exarchia Square there are people that say we don't want metro in Exarchia. There are people that they say we don't want metro in Exarchia Square. And I'm with the second approach, because I think that if we had the metro station one block after, we could fight for what I said before, for the rent controls, for the use control, but the metro in Exarchia Square, it has to do with the people they are using the square, with the change of the character of the square, not only with the profits. It's the profit, but it's not only the profits. It's who is using the square. It's the young people that they are staying there with a beer and they pass the night without paying any money to nobody. It's, you know, it's people that are, have a different, how can I say, a different presence, a different in the public space. So there is also a question, and I think Venda described it very well, about these actions that want to actually to push certain people from the places that they use, and they are in a, how can I say, in a conflict with the normal inside, you know, spaces situation of our typical white, etc., 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 families, etc. So I think that is, we have to fight in both levels. One that is more to defend certain spaces, and the other is to control against that kind of politics, and not one, only the one, and not the other.
Thank you. If there is anyone else who wants, we have 5 more minutes left. The discussions can continue outside or later at the party at Rasbain. If not, yeah, Annika.
I was just thinking to suggest for us to think from both perspectives that were emphasized here. So one, to ask why the so-called urban regeneration is happening, and the second, to ask how is that justified. So both questions are very crucial to understand how the production of built environment serves the interests of capital, and how discursively this is justified, right? And what Eva said, I guess it's very important to re-emphasize that. I also tried to do that at the beginning of my speech. So to see in this phenomenon that we have this technical word, urban regeneration, these two things, like the period of capitalism in which investment into built environment and real estate brings more profit, and it's much more secure investment than in productive economy. And secondly, how the state is creating opportunities for these investments. So it's one more tool, I guess, in the cohabitation between state and capital and their collaboration, and in these matters too, and is yeah. So therefore, I guess in our fights would be good to focus on both actors and somehow to criticize their complicity. And yeah, how yeah, the effects of this complicity, actually. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I just, yeah, Jan, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add something what I forgot in the beginning about the coalition in our meetings. It's a tradition that we do also an action all together. And this year, it's the 1st of May that we are doing our action. It's a kind of practical way, but also we will have discussion about this going together of the labor question and labor movement and housing movement. And I wanted to address all the people that came to the discussion here, that we would be really happy to see you again latest on Monday in our small action. Maybe Eniko, you can say again.
Yeah, I was about to exactly to say that there will be more public events. Tomorrow we will have a book launch, a collection of essays with experiences about fighting evictions. And here at 6, and then on Sunday there will be a film screening and discussion about the anti-racist housing justice struggle here in Cluj. And then on the 1st of May there will be this march in the Central Park. but you can find all the information there. So, is there anything else?
Maybe you should please take some of these programs.
Yeah, yeah, we have these very nice programs that you can have.
Maybe, yeah, our newspaper Caramida just came out from.
Yeah, it's very pretty. Yeah.
You can have there the poster of that person.
Okay. So thank you very much for being here. It's 8 sharp, so we're done. Thank you so much, Ansira.